Hello everybody, a very good morning to you. It is 7 o'clock this Thursday morning. You're very welcome to join us here on the breakfast programme on Sky News. More nuclear power stations, more offshore wind power and more oil and gas from the North Sea. That appears to be the government's strategy for keeping the lights on and reducing the UK's dependence on energy from Russia. But it's been criticised by environmentalists who accuse ministers of abandoning their climate targets. And it won't do much to cut soaring household bills either. I'm going to be chatting to the Energy Secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng. And here's a quiz question you might help us answer. How can someone be non-domiciled in the UK for tax purposes but still live in Downing Street? Talking about that. Thursday, 7th of April. Going nuclear, the Prime Minister promises 8 new power plants, but no targets are set for onshore wind. The Chancellor's wife defends her non-dom status, which means she doesn't pay tax here on money she earns, millions she earns abroad. Also this morning, the saviour of Mariupol, how a fearless mechanic has rescued 180 people from the besieged city.
And here in Brussels, NATO foreign ministers are meeting to discuss what more they will do to help Ukraine as the country braces for a major attack from Russia in the eastern Donbass region.
A security guard at the British Embassy in Berlin, accused of spying for Russia, will appear at Westminster Magistrates Court this morning. Joined by an RAF pilot who was told he may never fly again after being diagnosed with a rare incurable blood cancer. He went on to command the Red Arrows.
That glacier up there is where we head through tomorrow to get to Camp 2 and then on to Himmler.
And they made it. We'll speak to the former professional rugby player who's overcome a broken neck and paralysed limbs to climb mountains in Nepal. Morning, everybody. The Prime Minister's promised cheaper energy bills as the government announces a major new investment in nuclear power. The government says its energy strategy will take back control of soaring energy costs, but Labour insist it won't do anything to bring down bills. Here's more detail of the new energy strategy. The government has set a target of raising offshore wind generation by 5 times by 2030, but there's no target for onshore wind. They're also pushing to increase solar power generation. But the government is really putting its hopes into nuclear power, promising up to 8 new nuclear power stations by 2030, just around the corner. There are also plans to double the amount of energy produced by hydrogen. And there'll be a new licensing round for oil and gas projects in the North Sea, which has drawn criticism from green groups. Waiting to speak to the Minister about that. We'll bring you the Energy Secretary's comments in just a few moments. But first, another political story that's making the headlines this morning. Ali is here. How much tax does the Chancellor's wife pay on her overseas earnings here in the UK?
Well, this is a question that everyone is asking this morning. Non-dom status, that means that she doesn't pay tax on money earned outside the UK, here in the UK. Usually people that have non-dom status don't actually live in the country. But it's important to point out, legally, no suggestion of wrongdoing at all. But obviously, I think it's just bad optics, isn't it? It plays into the criticism that we've seen of the Chancellor not being in touch. The Chancellor that this week raised national insurance for so many people, the impact of the cost of living crisis. It plays into that really difficult week that we've had for him, criticism that he's given £100,000 to a top private school, Winchester College, criticism about the spring statement not going far enough. We've seen his popularity in the polls with Conservative members and with the public really plummeting. And now this news about his wife, worth saying, you know, she is a rich woman in her own right. Her father is a billionaire. He owns the company Infosys. She has shares in that company. That company, we're saying, was criticised last week because it wasn't quick enough to cut its ties with Russia. She has said in a statement that she's a citizen of India, the country of her birth and her parents' home. India doesn't allow its citizens to hold the citizenship of another country simultaneously. And according to British law, Ms Murty is treated as a non-domiciled for tax purposes. She will always and will continue to pay UK taxes on all her UK income, but that isn't enough for a lot of people. Labour accusing the government of one rule for them, one rule for everyone else.
Yeah, and we saw the Chancellor. He goes out of his way to try to be a man of the people. We saw him putting fuel in a Kia car, didn't we, when he was talking about cutting fuel duty. We've seen him serving burgers previously in a restaurant with his name tag on. And yet, the team telling me this morning that according to Forbes, he's worth £3.1 billion. None of this, even if it's not illegal, we know it's not illegal what they're up to, but it's not going to sit well with the British public who are having to choose between heating and eating.
Yeah, you're right. This was a Chancellor who could do no wrong when he first came in. You'll remember he sort of rose to stardom when Sajid Javid stepped down. But it has been a really difficult week. He is a wealthy man in his own right. He used to work at Goldman Sachs. As I say, his wife is a daughter of a billionaire. But things like filling up someone else's car, the spring statement that hasn't gone down well, none of that paints a good picture. And Labour are really trying to seize on this. You're almost sort of seeing them shifting their attack onto the Chancellor because they knew that he was someone, if he came into power, and he was tipped to be the person that might replace Boris Johnson when his leadership was really shaky over Partygate, they are really focusing their attacks now on Rishi Sunak and him being someone that isn't in touch. One rule for them, one rule for everyone else, they say.
OK, we'll chat to you again later. And, of course, Ali's take at 9 o'clock. Looking forward to that. Thanks very much indeed for now. Thanks a lot. Some technical issues with the Minister. We'll bring his comments to you just as soon as we possibly can. But first, let's tell you what's happening with Ukraine. It can absolutely win the war against Russia, according to the Pentagon, as officials say Russia's retreat from the capital, Kiev, is largely complete. But a warning from Ukraine that Russian forces are now preparing for a huge attack in the east of the country. And as accusations of Russian war crimes mount, the UN General Assembly could vote to remove Russia from the Human Rights Council when it meets later on. So let's find out more, should we, on the foreign ministers actually are meeting in Brussels for a second day of talks about how best to support Ukraine. Sally is there for us. Hi, Sally. They started chatting yesterday. We're going to be speaking to the Spanish foreign minister later on. How far did they get yesterday?
Well, some progress was made in talks. They had a working dinner last night where the Foreign Secretary Liz Truss urged NATO partners to toughen their stance against Russia. But if you just think a week ago, Kay, all eyes were on Istanbul, those peace talks that were taking place and the high hopes that were pinned on a potential breakthrough. Well, now, a week on, all eyes are on this NATO summit here in Brussels, a second day of talks about to begin. And of course, what's unfolded in Ukraine in the space of those two talks is quite extraordinary, and many would have found it hard to believe some of the terrible atrocities that have emerged in the last week. And certainly there is pressure on NATO to respond today and offer more military help to Ukraine. Now, the foreign minister for Ukraine has also arrived a few moments ago with the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, and he urged NATO to do more. He said, put aside your hesitations, your reluctance, and give Ukraine everything it needs. Weird as it sounds, weapons serve the purpose of peace. And here was his very simple message to NATO.
My agenda is very simple. It has only 3 items on it. It's weapons, weapons, and weapons. We are confident that the best way to help Ukraine now is to provide it with all necessary to contain Putin and to defeat Russian army in Ukraine, in the territory of Ukraine.
Dmytro Kuleba also said, let's hope we don't have to see another Bucha in order to get tougher sanctions and the support we need. Of course, Bucha was that town just outside Kyiv where those horrific images emerged just a couple of days ago, which shocked the world. And there is now pressure on NATO to respond to that. But of course, they have the delicate balancing act of not wanting to be seen by Vladimir Putin to becoming directly involved in this war. But certainly early signs that the Czech Republic may be sending tanks into Ukraine, the first NATO country to do so. It also has emerged in the last 24 hours that America is training Ukrainian troops to use drones over Ukraine. And also reports in the Times today from a defence source that the UK government may also be providing armoured vehicles such as the Mastiff or Jackal to help Ukraine as well. But there does seem to be a window of opportunity, according to British intelligence now, as Russian troops reorganise and rearm themselves to offer more support to Ukraine, because, of course, there is the logistical challenge of getting all those extra weapons and hardware into the country and into the positions that it's needed. But suggestions that it could take a week, if not more, for Russian troops to reorganise. So the pressure is on now for NATO to give Ukraine what it needs.
OK, Sally, for now, thank you. And as I said, we're going to be speaking to the Spanish Foreign Affairs Minister a little bit later on in the programme. And indeed, Iceland's First Lady as well. Tax show today. Meantime, the Ukrainian city of Mariupol has been absolutely devastated by Russian bombardments since the early days of the war, with those trapped having little to no access to food and water. And we're going to be talking about that in more detail in just a few moments' time. But I'm pleased to say we've sorted out the technical difficulties with the Minister, Kwasi Kwarteng, and he's joining us now. Hello to you, Mr. Kwarteng. Sorry about that, those gremlins early in the morning. We appreciate you bearing with us. Let's talk about energy strategy first of all, should we? Obviously, that's your brief. Now COP is out of the way. We talked a lot during that time, didn't we? And there's a war in Ukraine. Is net zero less of a priority for the government?
Not at all. I think that the net zero legislation, it is after all in law, is still the law of the land. We're focused on that. But of course, given what's happening around the world, given the pressure on energy prices, we're also doing lots of other things to make sure that we get independence, energy independence back into the UK. We want to have security of supply. We want to live in a world where we're not dependent on what Russian policy is, but we have more control over energy sources here in Britain, and that's what the strategy is all about.
Yeah, what people care most about at the moment, though, of course, is the impact that it's going to have on their energy bills. When will they see the difference?
You're absolutely right. I mean, in terms of people's energy bills, our people's energy bills this year, we've announced a number of measures, the £9.1 billion package, the £150 off council tax for people in bands A to D, £200 to pay those bills. And of course, you're right to say that the strategy is more of a medium-term 3, 4, 5 year answer. But that doesn't mean we can't address this. I think it's really important that we get an energy strategy and energy policy that means that we can have more security and independence in the years ahead.
How comfortable would you be living next door to a wind farm?
I've said that I don't personally have issues with wind farms, but of course I've also very clearly said that onshore wind farm developments have to be made with local consent. That doesn't work without that, and that's what we're committed to in the strategy. Okay.
Let's move on to the front page of the Daily Mirror today. In the news this morning, do you? Let's have a quick look at that. Do you agree with the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, who says that because his wife isn't an elected politician, journalists shouldn't be asked questions about her?
Look, I agree with him that it's completely unfair to be bringing someone who is not a politician and essentially attacking them in the way that's happening. I totally agree with him on that.
How does it look to the British public that while they're being asked to pay more tax from yesterday, the wife of the man who is asking us to do that is earning millions from overseas investments and not paying a penny?
So I looked at her statement yesterday. She made it very clear that as an Indian national, she can't have dual citizenship. And she's got a non-dom status here in the UK. Now, after 15 years staying here, she will be domiciled, but for the moment, she pays tax on UK income, as I understand, and on foreign income, she pays the tax outside the UK. That's what non-domicile status means. But I haven't come here to comment on her tax affairs.
No, but we're talking about the British public and the optics, if I may. You are here to represent the government today, not just on your own brief. That's your job this morning on behalf of Her Majesty's government. And I'm asking you about the optics of the British public who are being asked to pay more money and making the choice between heating and eating 500,000 kids in absolute poverty, and the woman who is married to the bloke that is enforcing all of that on us is not paying a penny in tax for her overseas earnings. I'm asking you about the optics of that for my viewers this morning.
So all I've said is, people can reach, obviously, their own conclusions. I mean, that's up to the viewers. But all I've said is that he's made full declaration of what's happened. It's a non-domicile status that is utterly legal. Everything is completely in order. He's always been very transparent about these issues.
She set up a business with others called Dig Me Fitness. It only went under after it had taken quite a lot of money as part of the furlough scheme. Debts of £415,000 that has been left to the British taxpayer to pick up. And again, I would put it to you that this is somebody who is richer than the Queen, who is living in the very heart of Westminster, representing your government. Are you completely comfortable with that?
I'm totally comfortable with people having businesses, people operating what they do as private citizens. I'm completely comfortable about that. And I think everything has been open and declared. And I'm happy with that. I don't know the details. Obviously, I'm not an expert on those her financial arrangements. But I think absolutely that people have a right to pursue their own business interests.
Yeah, £635,000 in furlough payments for a company that collapsed.
Look, I don't know about the details of the businesses that you're referring to, but I know that everything has been fully declared. I know that the Chancellor has put this all in his declaration of interests, and I also am aware that the non-domicile status is something that's been in British law for 230 years.
Can you accept at all that it might irk the British public?
Look, people will draw their own conclusions, and that's the great thing about this country. We have an open debate. People will have lots of different views. I've just come here to say very clearly that I think her tax affairs are a matter for her, and I don't know the details of the businesses that you've referred to.
No, I understand that, but I can't understand why you don't appreciate that somebody can't feed their kids, put food in their bellies and put the lights on in the house as well, and yet somebody else who's married to somebody who's making us make those decisions is making millions in overseas earnings and not having to pay a penny in tax.
Well, we've rehearsed this. I've said there's a non-domicile status that you clearly lots of people are aware of. And everything's been declared. That's what I've said.
Okay, let me ask you about. Okay, let me ask you this instead then. Do you agree with the Prime Minister that biological males should not be competing in female sporting events?
Yes, I do. I think he was very clear. It was very refreshing to see the leading politician in our country be very clear about that. I happen to agree with him on this.
Okay. The charity Stonewall, I'm sure you're aware of them, are saying that a blanket ban would be fundamentally unfair. Why are they wrong?
I think that we've seen in America and other places people who are biological males, smash records and win lots and lots of races, and I think that's unfair. I think what the Prime Minister said chimed with millions of people's views up and down the country. That it's unfair to have biological males competing with biological females in things like swimming contests and cycling.
You're completely comfortable with what's happening at number 11 Downing Street. What about number 10? Are you comfortable that the Prime Minister, in the words of the Leader of the Opposition, presided over widespread criminality while in office?
So again, we've been here many times. I think it's important that the police go through the full, Metropolitan Police go through the full investigation. They're doing that. As I understand, a number of people have been issued with fines. That's up to those individuals concerned. We've had Sue Gray as well looking at what's happened. And I'm just very interested in looking at the conclusion of those reports.
Yeah, the interim report says that 20 times the law was broken in Downing Street. Some would say that's widespread criminality. I'm not asking you to comment on what might happen. I'm asking you about what the police have already told us. And are you completely comfortable with a Prime Minister who's presided over the law being broken 20 times already in office?
What I am comfortable with is with a Prime Minister who's shown incredible leadership in this Russia-Ukraine crisis.
That's not what I'm asking you about, Minister.
Pointed out. No, you're asking me about whether I'm comfortable with the Prime Minister, and I'm 100%
No, I'm not. I didn't ask you that. I asked you whether you were comfortable with him presiding over law-breaking, is what I'm asking you specifically.
So on that specific point, I'm saying that let's see the full extent of the inquiry. But the underlying your question was somehow some suspicion that the Prime Minister wasn't doing a fantastic job.
That's specifically what I was asking you about. There was no sidebar to it at all.
Okay.
Let me put this to you then. The Justice Secretary says laws were broken at Downing Street. Do you agree with him, or do you think he's misspoken?
Look, all I'm saying is that I think we should look at the full extent of the report. I want to wait and see the full Gray report. I want to wait and see the full outcome of the Metropolitan investigations. We're at an interim stage, as you said.
Okay.
And I think we should. I will make my conclusions once this process is completed.
Okay. So the jury's still out for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well,
take a look at what. Thank you
I just said
very
let's wait and see where this thing ends up. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you. Thank you. Let's take a look at what some of the front pages are saying this morning, should we? Let's start with the FT, leading on the latest Russian sanctions as Western allies target yet more banks. The Times reports that the UK is set to send armoured vehicles to aid Ukraine in the fight against Russia. The Metro quotes the Prime Minister saying he has absolutely no problem with putting national insurance tax up, despite the rise in energy bills. The Eye's front page focuses on the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak's wife, stating that she avoided tax through her non-dom status. And the Daily Mirror also focus on the Chancellor's wife. We were just talking about that, weren't we, in detail with the Minister? Very kindly gave us his time to talk about it. And The Guardian reports that the Prime Minister's push for an increase in the use of nuclear power has divided members of his party and angered environmental groups. Still to come on the programme for you at 7:30 as the government unveils its new energy strategy, speaking to a personal finance expert about what the plans will mean for us for our fuel bills. Then just after 8, the Shadow Climate and Net Zero Secretary Ed Miliband will join me in the studio as Labour calls on the Prime Minister to step up and lead on renewable energy. And at around 8:20, we'll speak to a gambling addict turned campaigner and his entrepreneur son about the work they're doing to educate GPs about the early signs of a hidden gambling addiction. A security guard at the British Embassy in Berlin suspected of spying for Russia will appear in court here in the UK later on today. Aisha is outside Westminster Magistrates Court for us this morning. Good morning to you. Tell us more about this story, if you would.
Well, David Smith, as you said, he was a security guard at the British Embassy in Berlin, and the 57-year-old is being accused of spying for the Russian state. The Crown Prosecution Service and Metropolitan Police worked together to build up a prosecution case against him, and as a result, he has been charged with 9 offences, contrary to the Official Secrets Act. When we look at the breakdown of this, 7 of the offences he's been accused of relate to collecting information with intent to send it to Russian authorities. There's 1 offence of attempting communication and 1 other offence of providing information to a person he believed was a member of Russian authorities. Now, the alleged offences took place between October 2020 and August last year. And it was August last year, the 10th of August, when he was arrested by German police, and he had been held in custody. Since then, the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police have been working together with their German counterparts to extradite him. Of course, that happened yesterday, and today he is expected to appear here at Westminster Magistrates Court.
OK, Aisha, thank you very much indeed. Thanks a lot. I think the technical term for the weather overnight was it was flipping bucketing down.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Turning colder with blustery showers becoming increasingly wintry, mostly cold and windy now with gales through central parts, showers in the north, more prolonged snow for the Grampians.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Hello again, everybody. Welcome back to the Breakfast Show here on Sky News. Our top stories for you this morning. The government is set to reveal its energy strategy for the UK, with 8 new nuclear power stations set to be built. The Chancellor's wife says she has always paid tax on UK income, as Labour demands to know if Rishi Sunak has benefited from her tax status. And the Pentagon has said Ukraine can absolutely win the war against Russia, as officials say Russia's retreat from the capital, Kiev, is largely complete. In the last half an hour, the Business Secretary has told me that the government is still focused on its net zero target as it prepares to release its new energy strategy. Kwasi Kwarteng also told me he wants the UK to have full control of its own energy sources.
Not at all. I think that the net zero legislation, it is after all in law, is still the law of the land. We're focused on that. But of course, given what's happening around the world, given the pressure on energy prices, we're also doing lots of other things to make sure that we get independence, energy independence back into the UK. We want to have security of supply. We want to live in a world where we're not dependent on what Russian policy is, but we have more control over energy sources here in Britain, and that's what the strategy is all about.
That's what he's saying, Ali, about energy. He wasn't quite as comfortable to answer my questions about Mrs. Sunak.
He really wasn't, was he? He did not enjoy that at all, I didn't think. You, I think rightly, were pushing him on the criticism that we've seen of Rishi Sunak's wife's non-dom status, meaning that she doesn't pay tax on income earned outside the UK. She's obviously a very wealthy woman, daughter of a billionaire, has a big stake in her father's company. Worth pointing out that legally, no suggestion of wrongdoing at all, but clearly bad optics. But he said to you, I haven't come here to comment on her tax affairs. He really didn't want to answer it. And he sort of repeated again and again what we heard in her statement, effectively that she is a citizen of India, that she doesn't need to, that it was already declared in all the proper ways. That she...
Should we listen?
Yes, let's have a listen.
She pays tax on UK income, as I understand, and on foreign income, she pays the tax outside the UK. That's what non-domicile status means. But I haven't come here to comment on her tax affairs.
We're talking about the British public and the optics, if I may. You are here to represent the government today, not just on your own brief. That's your job this morning on behalf of Her Majesty's government. And I'm asking you about the optics of the British public who are being asked to pay more money and making the choice between heating and eating 500,000 kids in absolute poverty, and the woman who is married to the bloke that is enforcing all of that on us, is not paying a penny in tax for her overseas earnings. I'm asking you about the optics of that for my viewers this morning.
So all I've said is, people can reach, obviously, their own conclusions. I mean, that's up to the viewers. But all I've said is that he's made full declaration of what's happened.
Ooh, That was squeaky bum time, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and Partygate as well. He just sort of stared you out on one of those questions. Easier for him because he's not in the studio.
It's tricky for these ministers, though, isn't it? You know, because they have to come out and defend things that they don't, I suppose, in private necessarily agree with.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, all of these are questions for the Chancellor. It's been a pretty tough week for him. Criticism of the spring statement not going far enough, criticism of the £100,000 that he gave to his old school, Winchester College. He's seen his poll ratings plummet. So these were questions that obviously you were going to ask a government minister. Worth saying, you know, I think it's fair to say that there has been friction between the Treasury and the Business Department on this energy strategy, and not a huge amount of new money has come with this. So he was facing those tough questions, but I think was pretty keen not to answer any of them directly.
Yeah, tough week, as you say, for the Chancellor, perhaps tougher for those who can't afford to heat their homes anymore. Some might say. We'll see you at the top of the next hour.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ali. Thank you. Well, we're hearing from Kwasi Kwarteng, and Ali was pointing out there that energy bills could start to fall, but only in 2 to 3 years' time. So what happens between now and then? Financial expert and founder of Money Magpie, Jasmine Birtles, is with us now. Hi, Jasmine.
Hello, Kate.
Challenging time for so many of my viewers this morning. Where do they start to try to make ends meet?
As you say, it's very difficult, and for people like me really are coming to the end of the tips that we can give, and you get to a point where, frankly, you're sounding patronising when you're mentioning all the small things that we could do. There are many people, and I have neighbours who are in this situation who really have cut back as far as they can go, really, and they are just looking at how they can pay these bills and also pay the rising cost of food. It's very tough for people.
It is. The next energy price cap rise comes in, I think, in October. What can people expect from that?
Well, I'm sorry to say, another rise. This really does seem to be the trajectory at the moment, certainly for this year. One potential glimmer of hope is that the price of oil could be coming down towards the end of the year. So that would mean that petrol should be cheaper, and also some gas you would expect, because there's some gas that comes through the production of oil. So that is some sort of glimmer of hope. But in the short term, I would say that we are looking at very high energy bills at home. And we're coming into the summer, spring, summer, that's going to make it easier. And I do suggest that people save as much as they can, putting money aside for the winter, because that, as you say, we're getting the increase in October, and it's going to be very tough over the winter, I think.
Do you think that the Chancellor may do anything in the short term to try to help people more than what he's already said?
Well, I was very disappointed by the spring statement. I really thought that he would pull something out of the hat to do with energy prices. But afterwards, it did occur to me that maybe he's keeping his powder dry for the budget, that he knows that prices are going to be even higher then. So it's possible that he will come up with something, maybe a short-term rise to universal credit, something for pensioners, something for those who are already on benefits. Honestly, I don't know. Sadly, I'm not privy to his discussions, but I suspect, I hope, in all honesty, that there is something that they are considering to bring out in the budget to help those who are the most vulnerable.
OK, let's wait and see. Thanks so much indeed, Jasmine. Thank you. Hello again, welcome back to The Breakfast Show here on Sky. The Ukrainian city of Mariupol has been devastated by Russian bombardment since the early days of the war, with those trapped having little to no access to food or water. But despite the tragedy, one man's bravery has led him to be called the hero of Mariupol. He's helped 180 people flee in his Soviet-era saloon car. Here's Ashna.
In a city paralysed by this war, only the flimsy remnants of homes remain. Few have managed to escape Mariupol as it was pounded into submission. But Alexei has been risking his life going back in for the last 3 weeks. Each time, rescuing the most vulnerable and often coming under attack himself.
Вай, ляжь! Лежать! Подсид! Подсид!
Представляете, горят дома, кругом взрывы, погибшие люди. Но я брал людей, садил в машину, и мы летели, кричали от страха, от этого ужаса.
The former submarine engineer says he's fulfilling a duty, saving lives in his hometown. Each time Alexei returns, he finds yet more desperation.
Вначале я думал только о спасении своей семьи. Когда я вывез их в безопасное место, увидев тот страх и ужас других людей, которые шли мимо меня, пытаясь спастись. Сотни глаз смотрели, искали спасения, не понимая, что делать. Я человек, я мужчина. Я понял, что я должен их спасать.
Вот он, Порт-Сити.
Alexei has so far single-handedly rescued 180 people, including children, all in his beloved saloon.
Вот она, моя боевая подруга Волги, которая вывезла очень много людей. Я поменял на ней. Уже 5-й раскаты были порезаны осколками, стекла. Я вернусь в тот сожженный и буду вывозить.
Все вывезли.
It's ordinary civilians like Alexei that are some people's only hope of rescue. A tale of heroism from the darkest of places. Ashna Harinag, Sky News.
NATO meetings are taking place in Brussels this week, and foreign ministers will address President Putin's brutal invasion of Ukraine. Allies are stepping up their support for Ukraine's right to defend itself with things like anti-tank weapons, air defence systems and increased humanitarian assistance and financial aid. Well, Mark Wojciech, former Special Advisor for Russian and Eurasian Affairs, is with us now. Hello to you. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. A lot of talk going on in Brussels at the moment. Meantime, we're hearing from the Ukrainian president saying that's not what I need. What I need is your help on the ground. It's a very difficult situation, isn't it? And it continues.
It does, definitely, and especially when the world has seen the devastation that the Russian troops have left, the despicable images on the ground in the cities surrounding Kiev, and this is only the beginning. This is really the Russian way of war, and all this graphic footage has actually shown the world that Ukraine needs all the help and more, and it needs it now. Just about an hour ago, the Ukrainian foreign minister actually spelled it out quite eloquently and succinctly and simply. He said, there's no offensive weapons in this war, and everything you give us is defensive because we fight on our own territory. So he's asking for much more than anti-tank weapons. He's asking for armor, airplanes, obviously short sea missiles, and high-altitude air defense. So all these can be a factor, a multiplying factor in the war against Russia, so that Ukraine can create its own, its own no-fly zone, if you will, and also prevent the Russians from committing even more such despicable atrocities. And this is really, again, the tip of the iceberg of what we have seen. There's no way NATO would say no to such a plea at such a critical moment.
We know that the Czech Republic is in a position where it's planning to send more hardware, military hardware, to help in Ukraine. Russia has said that Western arms convoys to Ukraine are a legitimate target. Does the Czech Republic particularly realise the sort of challenges that they might be facing going forward?
Everybody realizes it. I'm sure the Czechs are well aware of that, and so are the other Eastern European states. Some are more reluctant to help exactly because of this reason. But look, the Russian propaganda has been blaring really for months that they're actually not fighting only Ukraine. In Ukraine, they're fighting American NATO. So in their own minds, they're actually already fighting the West, and therefore, providing weapons is not really an escalation of this nature. Actually, we should push our Eastern European NATO member states to actually provide more, because they are the ones that still have the Soviet era or Russian made equipment. That is Bulgaria, Slovakia, Poland. There were also initially there were talks about Poland providing airplanes and other assets. And think about it: Turkey has been providing Bayraktar drones that have decimated the Russian armor in Ukraine, and Turkey is hosting meetings, diplomatic high-level summits with Russia and Ukraine, and Russia so far hasn't attacked Turkey. So that's I think it's a flawed argument that if you provide aid, the Russians will automatically target your country.
We heard from the chairman of the Defence Select Committee of Parliament, a guy called Tobias Elwood, on the programme earlier in the week, and he was saying that we should be sending NATO ships to the Black Sea to defend Odessa. Would that mean that NATO was taking part in the war if they did that?
Well, the Black Sea is now being turned into a Russian lake, just like the Azov Sea was. And the Black Sea actually is shared by several NATO nations. That's Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey. So I would say no. I mean, ultimately, we need to do that. I've been talking also for a couple of years that we should have sent NATO ships on visits to also Mariupol back in the day when the Russians attacked the Ukrainian cutters in the Kerch Strait. So if there is a no-fly zone, I mean, if we're reluctant to impose it, we can do something about that, a no-sail zone, if you will, in the Black Sea, because Russia has been targeting international navigation. Think of the 1980s when the U.S. Fifth Fleet was protecting the tankers across the Persian Gulf. There are precedents, and we can use some of these legal precedents to actually impose some cost on the Russians, at least protect international navigation and minesweeping. The Russians have been letting free-floating mines trying to blend the Ukrainians, and these pose also a tremendous threat to the coastal nations of the Black Sea and international navigation. All the ships going there, most of it is grain, actually headed to the Middle East and Africa. Come summer, there will be tremendous food shortages in the global South, and this will be another one of Russia's hybrid tools in the war against the international legal order, effectively.
Okay, who's winning this war at the moment?
Definitely Ukraine. Ukraine is winning it on the ground, tactically, operationally, internationally, strategically, I would say. Information-wise, the information warfare is definitely critical. Unfortunately, Putin is still in power, and he's winning the war at home. That is, he's slowly but surely recreating the Soviet system, a totalitarian system that bans all dissent and has stifled all access to free information. So internationally, Ukraine is winning. Domestically, Russia is winning until such time that we're able to penetrate through this thick wall of lies and propaganda and convince the Russian people that he's bad even for Russia. He has to be taken down. He's no longer the legitimate leader of the Russian Federation from the point of view of the West.
But do you agree that this war could go on for years?
If he stays in power, it will go on for years. This is what his regime thrives on. I mean, his popularity soars every time there is a war. So he's using the salami tactics, as we call it. And in the U.S., he may be stopped during this iteration, and then regroup, regenerate his forces, and then attack again in the late summer, early fall next year. I mean, for as long as he's alive, he won't let Ukraine exist as an independent sovereign state, and we must help them, defeat this effectively monstrosity that's facing not only them but the West.
Okay, it's good to talk to you. Thank you for taking the time to join us on the programme this morning. Thank you. And as you know, foreign ministers are still meeting for a second day, actually, in Brussels, the European foreign ministers, to try to come up with a plan to further help the people of Ukraine. To that end, we're going to be speaking to the Spanish foreign minister, Jose Manuel Alvarez, that coming up in the next hour, actually, here on Sky News. Before that, though, let's show you what the business secretary, Kwasi Kwarteng, said earlier on in the programme when I asked him about reports the Chancellor's wife, it's in all the papers today, the Chancellor's wife doesn't pay tax here on the millions that she earns overseas.
She pays tax on UK income, as I understand, and on foreign income, she pays the tax outside the UK. That's what non-domicile status means. But I haven't come here to comment on her tax affairs.
but we're talking about the British public and the optics, if I may. You are here to represent the government today, not just on your own brief. That's your job this morning on behalf of Her Majesty's government. And I'm asking you about the optics of the British public who are being asked to pay more money and making the choice between heating and eating, 500,000 kids in absolute poverty, and the woman who is married to the bloke that is enforcing all of that on us, is not paying a penny in tax for her overseas earnings. I'm asking you about the optics of that for my viewers this morning.
So all I've said is, people can reach, obviously, their own conclusions. I mean, that's up to viewers. But all I've said is that he's made full declaration of what's happened.
Let us know what you think. You can tweet me directly if you would like to, at @Burley, cutting those grabs, as we call them in the trade, for Twitter as we speak. So if you want to listen again before you formulate your view, you can always reply underneath those tweets. Ben and Jack on that for you this morning. First, have a look at the papers. This is the Telegraph. Well, it says that robins are seen in Sunderland and probably lots of places as well. This male robin is feeding its mate in the garden in an example of what's called courtship feeding, which is nice. And earlier in the week, it wouldn't work for me, earlier in the week, one of you watching sent in this photo. You'd snapped of 3 majestic giraffes in Namibia. Do you remember? We were showing it to you. It looked like a 3-headed giraffe. Continuing with the theme, The Sun has this great image of 3 lions kicking back in the South African sun. See you at the top of the hour? Do hope so.